Welcome back to another Morpher Devlog. My name is Cole, and this week I started work on the third level of my mobile platformer. With the introduction of two enemies in the previous level redesign, I wanted to explore those mechanics a little further and introduce some more interactivity. After mapping out the basic layout, I added spikes along the top section of a pipe. I created a destructible box with particle effects, as well as an indestructible one that can be pushed by the player for extra mobility. As I've mentioned before, I plan on implementing challenges in certain levels, and in level 3, specifically, the player has to pass through the level while collecting stars. Each star collected is carried in a sort of canister along the top of the screen, and they have to be transported to the next checkpoint or the end of the level in order to be scored. The first star location, again just to introduce the player to the mechanic, is inside a tube, and it's unavoidable. But after that, the stars actually get really difficult to collect. There's one on top of a destructible box, and it can only be reached by jumping on the box before destroying it. And the third star is inside a spike section in which there's a tiny gap, and the player has to low hop in order to not crash into the spikes. But before I can start placing these stars, I need to implement the star collection system and sprites. So I made this canister sprite that sits on top of the screen, and it's got this kind of glass reflection on it. There were a couple edge cases for the entire animation process. Just if the star is in transit between any of the locations on the UI and the player dies, sometimes it would just freeze there or keep flying off out of the screen. So I just added this particle effect that every time the player dies, the star sort of explodes and respawns if the player hasn't collected it yet. And so going off of this, I also wanted to add some more general interactivity, and I added this set piece, which is a crane that holds a platform, and it bridges this gap that's too large for the player to jump over normally. And on the center platform is a button, which when they press, the whole screen shakes as this crane swings out and brings the platform over to the other side. I think adding things like this is just really fun for me, and I think it'll be interesting for players, and it adds to the overall theme of a very industrial setting and atmosphere. The rope itself is created by a chain of connected hinge joints. And Unity's joint physics are honestly a little annoying to work with, just because they can be stretched whenever they're moved, but I managed to achieve this effect by making each connected rigid body decrease in mass the further down the rope they are. Next, I got to work on updating my coin sprite, just by adding some shading and texture. I took inspiration again from the Donkey Kong Country franchise by teaching the player to trust coin paths, and it gives me a tool that I can utilize to direct players in the path just by placing coins. As I test and develop, I've been keeping speedrunning in mind. The game has always encouraged a really fast mode of play, and I want to lean more into that. So every jump is pretty optimized. That's it for this week. I'm 3 levels down now, and I have 3 more to go until I'm finished with this sector. For now, thanks for tuning in. If you want to support this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing so you don't miss the next episode. My Patreon is linked in the description, and I'll see you next week.